Today's fairy tale is one of the wildest and most twisting snake husband fairy tales from Burma. It's called The Story of the Hamadryad, and it doesn't mean like Greek mythology like the tree nymphs. It means a king cobra. There's a poor old woman and the only thing she possesses is 3 beautiful daughters. She goes out to catch fish. A snake crawls into her basket. She takes it home intending to kill it later, but then she forgets about it once she puts her basket down and it slithers away and hides in a jar of condiment. One day she goes to dip her hand into the jar of condiment and the snake is all around her hand and it won't let go. She says, "Worthy snake, if you desire to marry my daughter, then please let go, I'll let you have her." Wouldn't have been my first reaction, but it's hers. And it works because the snake doesn't want her oldest or her second, he wants her 3rd youngest daughter. So the snake lets go and the woman goes to her youngest daughter and says, "Hey, you're sleeping with this snake tonight, he is your husband from now on." So the poor girl entered the bridal chamber in fear and trembling, awaiting for her reptile husband, but as soon as he slithers in, to her great joy and astonishment, his snakeskin peels off and he's a hot dude. Turns out he's not a snake, he's a gnat, which in Burmese folklore is like a spirit creature. He asks the girl to keep this a secret, and she does, and they live happily for a while. But as usually happens in these stories, her sisters are like, "Girl, how can you stand spending every night with a snake?" And she eventually tells them the truth. And her sisters say, "Here's what you do. When he's in human form, take the snakeskin and burn it, and then he can be human all the time." That night after he takes off his snakeskin, she throws it in the fire, and he starts screaming, I'm burning, and rolling around in agony. But then once it's burnt and the agony is past, he's like, "Oh, I'm actually super glad you did that." In almost every other version of this kind of story, he then has to leave and she has to go on some kind of quest to get him back. But not in this one. He's like, "Hell yeah, I'm so glad you did that." So now that everyone knows he's this magical creature, he conjures this entire castle for him and his wife to go live in. She gets pregnant and then he has to go on a journey. And so he's like, "Wife, don't leave our castle while I'm gone in case something bad would happen to you or the child." He leaves, she stays in the castle, but the sisters are super jealous and they want to find a way to ruin it for her. They're like, "Hey, come out and fish with us." And she's like, "No, I'm not supposed to leave." And they're like, "Come out and break firewood with us." She's like, "Sounds totally fun, but no." And then finally they're like, "Hey, remember this swing down by the river? Come swing with us like we used to." And that gets her to come out. They go to the river, they each take turns in the swing, but when it's our girl's turn, they purposely push her off so she flies out into the river. She's about to fall in and drown, but then this giant stork happens to be coming by and swoops down and rescues her. The stork takes her to go live safely in its nest where she looks after the little babies. The sisters somehow missed all of this and think she's dead, so they go home and start living in the castle in her place. Our girl living in the nest gives birth to her child and the stork loves it, considers it one of her own, until one day our girl is rocking the baby because it won't sleep and says something like, "Son of the Hamadryad, my son." And the stork gets super mad and is like, "That is my son? If you don't say it's my son, I'm gonna peck it apart with my beak." So she changes the words to the song and she's like, "Mighty child of the stork, go to sleep." The stork's happy about that, but whenever the stork is gone, she returns to the real lullaby. One day, her husband finally comes back home, and as he's making his way to the castle, he hears her singing the lullaby with the real words. And it says he looks up and he's like, "I don't know how my wife got up there, but oh look, there's my wife and my child." He climbs up, peeks into the nest, and he's like, "Wife," and she's like, "Husband," and she tells him everything that happened. The birds come back and then he tells them, "Hey, this is my wife," and the birds are pretty reasonable. They're like, "All right, we understand you have a claim on them, but we raised them, we took care of them, they mean a lot to us now, so we're gonna need a whole lot of fish before we let you take them away." So he gets them tons of fish by drying up the river, and then they can just go in and get all the fish, and then he makes the river, flow again. He takes his wife and his son home, but conceals them in a box and pretends he doesn't have them when he goes in and sees the sisters living in the palace. And so every day he has them bring him meals, and then he lets the wife out and shares food with her and the baby. Then finally he announces this big feast and invites everyone in the kingdom. He turns to the sisters and in front of everyone he says, "Hey sisters, tell everyone that wild story about how my wife disappeared." And while they're telling the story, he goes and gets his wife and son, and by the time they're done with the story, he brings them in and he's like, "Ha ha, they're alive." And as soon as the sisters see that she's alive, they're so overwhelmed with grief and shame, they just die in their seats at the dinner table. From then on, the man and his wife have more children and live happily ever after, but the story's not over. Another old woman in the village hears about this amazing story, so she decides, "I'm gonna marry one of my daughters to a snake." So she goes and finds a boa constrictor, puts it in the room room with her youngest daughter and says, all right, this is your husband, hoping the same thing happens. But it doesn't. The boa constrictor starts to devour her bit by bit, and she screams for help from her mother. He's like, mother, he's up to my ankles. And she's like, he's just putting on your anklets. Then she's like, mother, it's up to my waist. And she's like, he's just putting on your skirt. He's up to my neck. Oh, little girl, be quiet. He's putting on a necklace. The next morning, there was profound silence in the bridal chamber. She goes in to find her daughter was no more, and on the couch, the snake was fully stretched out with a bloated stomach, calmly sleeping off the effects of the full meal it had enjoyed the night previous. Then the mother felt sorry for the evil she had done, and she carried that in her heart for the rest of her life. And that's the end. Don't feed your daughter to a snake just because you heard that worked out once for someone else. That's a pretty solid lesson. As always, check out my book, my podcast, all the links are in the bio.